The fastest way to lose your future is to judge a stranger before you learn their name. The granite steps of the Richmond County Courthouse shimmered beneath the bright Virginia morning sun as attorneys hurried through the entrance carrying leather briefcases. Reporters adjusted camera equipment near the front plaza, and courthouse employees prepared for another demanding day inside one of the busiest judicial buildings in the state. Everything appeared routine until a sharp voice cut through the steady rhythm of footsteps. "Ma'am, stop where you are." Every nearby conversation faded. Officer Ryan Mitchell walked forward with the practiced confidence of someone who believed hesitation created danger. His neatly pressed uniform, polished badge, and measured stride projected complete authority as he focused on a black woman calmly approaching the courthouse entrance with a slim leather portfolio tucked beneath one arm. She appeared to be in her mid-40s, professionally dressed in a navy business suit with understated elegance, her expression composed, her pace unhurried, and her attention fixed on the courthouse doors rather than the gathering crowd beginning to watch the encounter. Ryan had received a brief radio message only minutes earlier describing a woman who might be attempting to interfere with a confidential proceeding scheduled for that morning. The description had been vague, incomplete, and lacking confirmed identification, yet Ryan believed he had already found the person dispatch intended him to locate. "I need you to provide identification," he said firmly. The woman stopped immediately without displaying irritation or fear. She slowly opened her portfolio, removed a government credential, and extended it toward him with steady hands. "My name is Vanessa Brooks," she said calmly. "I have official business inside." Ryan accepted the credential, but gave it only the briefest glance before lowering it. Instead of carefully reading every detail, he studied her face as though he had already reached a conclusion. "These credentials will need to be verified," he replied. "Until then, you are not entering this building." Several attorneys walking past slowed their pace. A courthouse clerk paused near the entrance. Two law students, standing beside the bronze statue in the courtyard, exchanged uncertain looks. Vanessa remained remarkably composed. "Officer," she answered softly, "everything that happens next will be remembered. I would encourage you to verify the information before making a decision you cannot easily undo." Her words carried neither arrogance nor defiance. They sounded more like quiet advice offered to someone standing at an important crossroads. Ryan interpreted her calm confidence differently. To him, it appeared rehearsed, the sort of composure displayed by someone trying to avoid further questions. Convinced additional action was necessary, he informed her that she would be temporarily detained while her identity was confirmed through official channels. Vanessa offered no resistance. She simply nodded once and allowed the process to continue according to his instructions, never raising her voice or demanding special treatment. Around them, the courthouse plaza fell unusually silent. Reporters lowered their microphones without speaking. Lawyers who had argued hundreds of cases suddenly seemed uncertain whether they should intervene. Even the security officers stationed near the metal detectors watched the scene with growing concern. Vanessa looked toward the courthouse entrance for only a brief moment before returning her attention to Ryan. "There is still time to verify everything carefully," she said with the same steady voice. "Justice deserves patience." Ryan answered with complete certainty. "That is exactly what I am doing." What neither he nor the silent crowd understood was that within the next few minutes, the courthouse they entered every day would become the place where one mistaken assumption changed the course of an officer's career and reminded everyone watching that true authority never needs to announce itself before it earns respect. Imagine walking into a courthouse to protect justice only to discover that justice itself is about to test everyone watching. The silence surrounding the courthouse entrance grew heavier with every passing second as Officer Ryan Mitchell stood firmly between Vanessa Brooks and the wide marble steps leading toward the front doors. Around them, Richmond County Courthouse continued its busy morning routine, yet the rhythm had quietly changed. Lawyers carrying thick case files slowed their pace without realizing it. Court clerks paused halfway through conversations. Even the security officers stationed beside the metal detectors exchanged uncertain glances while pretending not to stare. Vanessa remained exactly where Ryan had instructed her to stand. She neither argued nor pleaded. She simply held her leather portfolio close to her side, her posture straight, her breathing measured, and her attention focused on the courthouse entrance as though time itself meant more to her than the uncomfortable situation unfolding around her. Ryan interpreted her composure as confidence that needed to be challenged. Years of police work had taught him to trust his instincts, and at that moment he believed his instincts were protecting the courthouse from someone attempting to interfere with an important legal proceeding. The radio message he had received only moments earlier still echoed in his mind. A woman. Possible interference. Immediate verification recommended. The description had been incomplete, yet Ryan convinced himself he had connected every missing piece. He reached for his shoulder radio and requested expedited identity confirmation, speaking with complete certainty that the situation would soon validate his decision. The dispatcher acknowledged the request, but instead of providing an immediate answer, there was an unusual pause before responding that additional verification was being completed through state records. Ryan frowned slightly. Identity checks rarely required extra time for ordinary courthouse visitors. Vanessa noticed the brief hesitation crossing his face, but chose her words carefully. "Officer Mitchell," she said in the same calm voice that had never once risen above conversation level. "Sometimes patience protects more people than certainty." Ryan answered without hesitation. "Patience begins after security concerns have been resolved." Vanessa gave a small, respectful nod. "That is true," she replied, "provided the concern has been correctly identified." The exchange drew the attention of several attorneys standing near the courthouse fountain. One older defense attorney quietly removed his reading glasses and studied Vanessa more closely. Something about her face seemed familiar, though he could not immediately remember why. Nearby, two assistant prosecutors walked through the front entrance before suddenly slowing their pace. One looked toward Vanessa, then back toward the courthouse doors with visible confusion. Without saying a word, he reached into his pocket and checked his phone as though confirming an appointment. A courthouse administrator emerged briefly through the revolving doors, scanned the entrance plaza, then disappeared inside again much faster than before. Small details began appearing everywhere, each one subtle enough to ignore on its own, yet together they formed a pattern that no one except Vanessa seemed to recognize. The breeze carried the sound of church bells from downtown Richmond, while courthouse flags moved gently against the clear blue sky. Everything looked peaceful, but beneath the quiet morning routine, something significant was beginning to shift. Ryan remained focused on procedure, unaware that the delay in the identity check was no ordinary administrative inconvenience. Somewhere inside the courthouse, several people had already realized exactly who was standing outside, and they were moving much faster than anyone on the plaza could yet understand. Officer Ryan Mitchell folded his arms as the quiet uncertainty around the courthouse entrance continued to grow. The longer the verification took, the more convinced he became that he had prevented a serious disruption before it reached the courtroom. Experience had taught him that hesitation could create unnecessary risk, and although something about the woman's calm demeanor felt unusual, he refused to let doubt influence what he believed was responsible police work. Vanessa Brooks remained standing exactly where he had instructed her. She did not pace. She did not argue. She simply watched the courthouse doors as though every passing second carried meaning that no one else could yet understand. Her leather portfolio rested comfortably against her side, and her expression reflected neither frustration nor fear. It was the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years working inside the justice system and understood that truth never needed to rush. Nearby, a young courthouse clerk hurried through the revolving doors before suddenly stopping in mid-step. She looked toward Vanessa, blinked twice in surprise, then quickly disappeared back inside the building without saying a word. Ryan noticed the reaction, but dismissed it as ordinary courthouse business. Every morning brought dozens of attorneys, judges, staff members, and visitors through those doors. He had no reason to believe this moment was any different. Across the plaza, an elderly attorney who had practiced law in Richmond for more than 30 years quietly leaned toward a colleague. "Does she look familiar to you?" he whispered. His colleague studied Vanessa for a moment before slowly nodding. "I know I have seen her somewhere," he replied. "I just cannot remember where." Their conversation ended abruptly when several assistant prosecutors entered the courtyard from a side hallway. The moment they noticed Vanessa, their expressions changed from casual conversation to visible concern. One immediately checked his phone while another turned back toward the courthouse entrance, walking much faster than before. Ryan watched them disappear inside, but remained focused on maintaining control of the scene. His radio crackled once again. "Officer Mitchell, continue holding your position," the dispatcher said carefully. "Additional confirmation is still in progress." Ryan frowned. He had never experienced a simple identification check taking this long. Even federal credentials were usually verified within minutes. For the first time that morning, a small question entered his mind. What could possibly require this level of confirmation? Vanessa noticed the brief hesitation crossing his face. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the longest delays happen because people are trying to prevent a much larger mistake." Ryan looked directly at her. "If everything is legitimate, then this will be resolved shortly." Vanessa offered a respectful nod. "I sincerely hope so." The sincerity in her voice unsettled him more than any argument could have. She did not sound worried about herself. She sounded concerned about him. That difference lingered in his thoughts longer than he expected. Suddenly, the large wooden courthouse doors opened again. This time it was not another group of attorneys or clerks. A state judge stepped onto the front landing, accompanied by 2 senior prosecutors and the courthouse administrator. They scanned the plaza only once before every pair of eyes settled on Vanessa Brooks. None of them appeared surprised to see her. Instead, they looked deeply concerned that she was still standing outside. Ryan straightened his posture, believing they had finally arrived to confirm the identity of the woman he had detained. He had no idea that within moments, the conversation about to unfold on those courthouse steps would completely redefine everything he believed had happened that morning. The judge descended the courthouse steps with measured urgency, followed closely by 2 senior prosecutors and the courthouse administrator. Their polished shoes echoed across the stone walkway, drawing every eye in the plaza toward the entrance. Conversation stopped almost instantly. Reporters lowered their cameras, courthouse employees stood motionless, and attorneys who had been rushing to morning hearings quietly stepped aside. Officer Ryan Mitchell interpreted the arrival as confirmation that courthouse leadership intended to support his decision. He straightened his uniform, believing the verification process had finally reached its conclusion. "Good morning, Your Honor," he said respectfully. This individual was stopped pending identity confirmation after a security concern was reported. The judge listened without interrupting, yet his attention never settled on Ryan for more than a brief moment. Instead, his eyes remained fixed on Vanessa Brooks. There was no confusion in his expression. There was only growing concern that she was still standing outside instead of being inside the courtroom where she was expected. Vanessa met his gaze with the same calm composure she had maintained since the encounter began. She offered the slightest nod, silently asking him to remain patient. The judge understood immediately. He resisted the obvious urge to intervene before every fact had been confirmed. Beside him, one of the senior prosecutors quietly whispered to the courthouse administrator, who immediately stepped several feet away and began making a phone call. Ryan noticed the unusual exchange, but remained convinced it was simply part of the verification process. He reached once more for his shoulder radio. "Dispatch, do you have an update?" he asked. A few seconds passed before the dispatcher answered, and this time the voice sounded noticeably more cautious than before. "Officer Mitchell, continue holding your position. State officials are responding directly." Ryan frowned. State officials. That phrase was almost never used during an ordinary identity verification. Around the plaza, subtle reactions continued multiplying. A court reporter quietly gathered her notes instead of entering the building. 2 assistant district attorneys who had just exited the courthouse immediately stopped walking when they recognized Vanessa. Neither approached her. Both simply exchanged uneasy glances before stepping respectfully to one side. Even the courthouse security supervisor, who had spent nearly 20 years screening visitors, appeared unusually uncomfortable. Vanessa watched these reactions without satisfaction. She had no interest in embarrassing anyone. Her concern remained fixed on the proceedings scheduled to begin inside. She looked toward Ryan once more. "Officer Mitchell," she said gently, "every minute matters this morning. There are people waiting inside who deserve justice without unnecessary delay." Ryan answered professionally. "Once your identity is fully confirmed, you will be free to continue." She nodded politely. "I appreciate your commitment to procedure. I only hope the procedure reaches the truth." Her words lingered in the morning air long after she finished speaking. They carried no accusation, only quiet conviction. Then the heavy wooden courthouse doors opened once again. This time, several officials from the state attorney's office emerged together, moving with unusual purpose. One carried a thick case file marked with the official state seal. Another looked directly toward Vanessa before increasing his pace. The expressions on their faces immediately erased the remaining confidence Ryan had been carrying since the encounter began. Something about the way every senior legal official focused on the woman standing before him made one impossible thought begin forming in his mind. For the first time that morning, Officer Ryan Mitchell wondered whether the person he believed he was preventing from entering the courthouse might actually be the very person everyone inside had been waiting to welcome. The officials from the state attorney's office crossed the courthouse plaza with unmistakable urgency, their polished briefcases swinging at their sides as they moved through the gathering crowd. No one spoke. Attorneys stepped out of their path. Reporters instinctively lowered their microphones. Even the courthouse security officers watched with quiet uncertainty, sensing that the routine morning had taken an unexpected turn. Officer Ryan Mitchell remained where he was, determined to complete the verification process before allowing anyone to proceed. He still believed he had acted responsibly, yet the confidence that had guided every decision since sunrise was beginning to give way to unanswered questions. One of the senior attorneys slowed as he approached Vanessa Brooks. His expression reflected concern rather than surprise. Before speaking, he looked respectfully toward the judge, then back to Vanessa as if silently asking permission to continue. Vanessa answered with the slightest nod, encouraging everyone to remain calm. She had no interest in creating a public confrontation on the courthouse steps. Her priority had never changed. She wanted the day's legal proceedings to begin on time and without unnecessary disruption. The senior attorney turned toward Ryan. "Officer," he said politely, "may I ask whether the identification presented has been fully reviewed?" Ryan answered with professional confidence. "Verification is still pending through state channels." The attorney exchanged a brief glance with the courthouse administrator, whose concern deepened immediately. Around them, more members of the legal staff quietly emerged from inside the building. Several recognized Vanessa the moment they stepped outside. One assistant prosecutor stopped so suddenly that a stack of case files nearly slipped from his hands. Another whispered something to a colleague before both stood silently at the edge of the plaza. None of them approached her. None of them questioned her presence. Their reactions alone spoke louder than any explanation. Ryan noticed every one of those details. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Why did so many experienced legal professionals appear to know this woman? Why had the state verification taken far longer than any ordinary identity check? Why did no one seem concerned about her, but instead appear concerned for the situation itself? His shoulder radio crackled again. The dispatcher's voice sounded noticeably more formal than before. "Officer Mitchell, remain at your current location. Senior representatives from the Office of the Attorney General have confirmed involvement. Additional instructions are being delivered directly on scene." Ryan lowered the radio slowly. The words settled heavily in his mind. The Office of the Attorney General. That level of involvement simply did not occur during routine courthouse security matters. Vanessa quietly observed the realization beginning to appear across his face. She spoke with the same calm voice she had maintained from the beginning. "Officer Mitchell, there are moments in every career when we are given an opportunity to pause before making our final conclusion. Those moments define us far more than the decisions themselves." Ryan looked at her for several seconds without responding. For the first time that morning, he no longer viewed her as someone attempting to enter the courthouse without proper authorization. He saw a woman whose extraordinary composure had remained completely unchanged despite every assumption surrounding her. Just then, the courthouse doors opened once more. This time the chief judge emerged alongside the state attorney general's chief of staff. The moment the chief of staff saw Vanessa Brooks standing outside, his face reflected immediate disbelief. Without hesitation, he walked directly toward her, carrying an official state folder embossed with the gold seal of the Commonwealth. Every conversation across the courthouse plaza disappeared into complete silence as dozens of eyes followed his every step. Ryan instinctively straightened his posture, suddenly realizing that whatever happened next would answer every question that had haunted the last several minutes. and that the answer might change everything he believed he understood about the woman standing quietly before him. The chief of staff closed the remaining distance across the courthouse plaza without slowing his pace. Every official standing near the entrance instinctively stepped aside, creating a clear path directly toward Vanessa Brooks. The morning breeze carried the sound of fluttering flags above the courthouse roof, but even that gentle movement seemed to disappear beneath the weight of the silence surrounding the scene. Officer Ryan Mitchell remained standing between Vanessa and the courthouse doors, uncertain whether he should continue following the procedure he had begun or step aside for the officials now approaching. Before he could decide, the chief of staff stopped directly in front of Vanessa, holding the state folder firmly against his side. His expression reflected equal parts relief and disbelief. "Attorney Brooks," he said respectfully, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "we have been looking for you. The chief judge and the attorney general have been waiting for your arrival. The hearing cannot begin without you." The words echoed across the marble plaza. Every attorney, every courthouse employee, every security officer, and every reporter standing nearby seemed to freeze at exactly the same moment. Ryan felt his thoughts come to a complete stop. "Attorney Brooks, the hearing cannot begin without you." He slowly looked toward the identification card still resting in his hand. This time he actually read the credentials instead of merely glancing at them. The official state seal, the name Vanessa Brooks, the title beneath it, State Chief Prosecuting Attorney. The very information she had quietly offered him from the beginning had been there all along. He simply had not taken the time to see it. Vanessa accepted the credential with steady hands and placed it carefully back inside her leather portfolio. She did not smile. She did not display satisfaction. She did not remind anyone that she had warned them only minutes earlier. Instead, she turned toward Ryan with the same calm expression she had carried since the encounter began. "Officer Mitchell," she said gently, "would you allow me to enter the courthouse now? There are families inside waiting for today's proceedings to begin." Her words carried no resentment. They carried responsibility. Ryan immediately stepped aside, his confidence replaced by quiet humility. "Yes, ma'am," he answered sincerely. "I apologize for the delay." Vanessa acknowledged his words with a respectful nod. "Thank you." There was no lecture, no public embarrassment, no demand for immediate consequences. The restraint surprised everyone watching. Around the plaza, courthouse employees exchanged stunned glances. Several assistant prosecutors lowered their eyes, recognizing how easily assumptions had almost delayed one of the most important hearings of the year. The chief judge quietly approached Vanessa and extended his hand in greeting. "We are grateful you are here," he said warmly. "Everyone is assembled." Vanessa shook his hand before answering. "Then let us begin. Justice should never wait longer than necessary." As she started walking toward the courthouse entrance, every senior legal official naturally fell into step beside her. Ryan remained where he stood, watching the group disappear through the tall wooden doors. For the first time in his career, he fully understood that authority was not always the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it arrived quietly, carrying only a leather portfolio, speaking with patience instead of pride, and leaving behind a lesson that would remain far longer than any badge, title, or courtroom verdict. The courthouse doors closed softly behind Vanessa Brooks, yet the lesson unfolding outside had only begun. Officer Ryan Mitchell remained on the front steps, watching the polished wooden entrance through which the state's chief prosecuting attorney had disappeared. The busy sounds of the city slowly returned around him. Reporters resumed quiet conversations, attorneys hurried toward scheduled hearings, and courthouse employees continued their morning routines, but everything felt different now. The confidence that had guided Ryan only minutes earlier had been replaced by careful reflection. His supervising lieutenant arrived after receiving the dispatch updates and approached without urgency. There was no anger in his expression, only professionalism. "Ryan," he said calmly, "I need your incident report, your radio log, and your body camera recording. Standard procedure requires that we document everything exactly as it happened." Ryan nodded immediately. He understood the request was not punishment. It was accountability. Without hesitation, he removed the recording device from his uniform and handed it over along with his notebook. "Everything is there," he replied quietly. "Nothing has been edited or omitted." The lieutenant accepted the materials with a respectful nod. "That is the correct decision." Nearby, Several courthouse employees who had witnessed the encounter exchanged thoughtful glances. None of them celebrated what had happened. They recognized that mistakes inside the justice system carried consequences for everyone, not only for the people directly involved. A senior public defender quietly remarked to a younger attorney, "The strength of any legal system is measured by what it does after a mistake, not by pretending mistakes never happen." Those words settled heavily across the small group gathered near the entrance. Inside the courthouse, Vanessa had already entered the courtroom where judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and victims' families had been waiting. She apologized only for the unexpected delay before opening the case, files waiting on counsel table. Not once did she mention the incident outside. Her attention belonged entirely to the families depending on the legal process that day. Her professionalism impressed everyone present even more than her title ever could. Outside, Ryan replayed the morning in his mind. He remembered the identification card she had calmly offered. He remembered her repeated requests to verify the facts before reaching conclusions. Most of all, he remembered that she had never attempted to use her position to gain immediate compliance. She had trusted the process even when the process had temporarily failed her. That realization stayed with him longer than any formal review ever could. A few minutes later, the courthouse administrator stepped outside carrying a sealed envelope. He approached Ryan with a courteous expression. "Attorney Brooks asked me to give you this after the hearing began." Ryan accepted the envelope with visible surprise. Inside was a single handwritten note. It read, "Every professional will eventually make a difficult decision under pressure. What defines a career is not whether mistakes occur, but whether we have the humility to learn from them. Continue serving with fairness. Vanessa Brooks." Ryan read the message twice before quietly folding it and placing it inside his notebook. There were no harsh words, no demand for retribution, no attempt to embarrass him, only a reminder that justice begins long before a courtroom opens its doors. Standing beneath the courthouse columns, Ryan finally understood that the badge on his chest represented more than authority. It represented the responsibility to slow down, seek the truth, and remember that every person deserves to be seen as an individual before they are judged by assumption. By late afternoon, the courthouse had returned to its familiar rhythm, yet the events of the morning continued to influence everyone who had witnessed them. Attorneys leaving the courtroom spoke more quietly than usual. Court clerks carried stacks of files through the hallways with thoughtful expressions. Even the reporters who had originally expected a dramatic headline found themselves discussing something entirely different. The real story had never been about public embarrassment. It had become a lesson about responsibility, restraint, and the importance of verifying facts before reaching conclusions. Inside her office, Vanessa Brooks finished reviewing the final documents from the hearing before looking through the large window overlooking the courthouse plaza. The same marble steps where the misunderstanding had unfolded only hours earlier were now filled with ordinary citizens entering and leaving the building, each carrying their own hopes, concerns, and expectations of the justice system. She understood that every one of them deserved the same fairness, regardless of appearance, reputation, or position. Her assistant stepped into the office carrying a folder. "Several people have asked whether you would like to file a formal complaint," she said carefully. Vanessa closed the file she had been reading and smiled gently. "The proper administrative review is already taking place," she replied. "That process exists for a reason. My responsibility is to make sure justice continues moving forward." Her assistant nodded with quiet admiration before leaving the room. Meanwhile, Officer Ryan Mitchell attended a scheduled meeting with his department's training supervisor. The discussion was professional and respectful. Together, they reviewed department procedures, communication protocols, and the importance of allowing complete verification before allowing assumptions to influence judgment. Ryan accepted every recommendation without argument. He no longer viewed the review as criticism. He saw it as an opportunity to become the kind of officer the community deserved. When the meeting ended, the training supervisor paused before Ryan reached the door. "Experience is valuable," he said. "But wisdom begins the moment experience is willing to keep learning." Ryan thanked him sincerely before stepping outside into the warm Virginia afternoon. Several days later, the courthouse hosted a community outreach program where local students met judges, attorneys, and law enforcement officers to learn about the justice system. Vanessa Brooks volunteered to answer questions from the students, while Officer Ryan Mitchell assisted with courthouse security during the event. Their paths crossed once again in the main hallway. Ryan greeted her respectfully. "Good morning, Attorney Brooks." Vanessa returned the greeting with a warm smile. "Good morning, Officer Mitchell. It is nice to see you again." There was no awkwardness between them, only mutual professionalism. A young student watching nearby quietly asked his teacher, "Do they know each other?" The teacher smiled. "They both learned something important," she answered. "Sometimes the strongest people are not the ones who never make mistakes. They are the ones who choose to grow after making them." Ryan heard those words as he welcomed another family into the courthouse. He noticed that he now greeted every visitor the same way, taking an extra moment to listen before speaking and allowing facts to guide every decision. Without realizing it, the lesson Vanessa Brooks had quietly demonstrated on the courthouse steps had already become part of the way he served the public. In that simple change, justice had achieved something no courtroom ruling alone could ever accomplish. Months passed, and the morning that had once seemed destined to become an embarrassing headline slowly transformed into something far more meaningful. New officers joining the Richmond Police Department heard the story during professional training, not as an example of failure, but as an example of why patience belongs beside authority. Instructors never focused on personalities. They focused on principles. They reminded every recruit that the smallest decision made in a matter of seconds could shape public trust for years to come. Officer Ryan Mitchell often found himself assigned to mentor younger officers entering the profession. They noticed one habit almost immediately. Before making important decisions, Ryan always paused long enough to ask one additional question, request one additional verification, or allow one more opportunity for someone to explain. When asked why he worked that way, he simply smiled and answered, "Justice deserves one more moment than assumption." He never needed to tell the entire story. The lesson had already become part of the officer he had chosen to become. Across town, Vanessa Brooks continued serving as the state's chief prosecuting attorney with the same quiet professionalism that had defined her entire career. She prosecuted cases, advised investigators, met with victims' families, and spent long evenings reviewing evidence because she believed every person deserved a process built on facts instead of prejudice. Those who worked with her admired not only her legal knowledge, but also her remarkable consistency. She treated judges, attorneys, clerks, officers, witnesses, and defendants with the same calm respect because she believed dignity should never depend upon someone's position inside a courtroom. One autumn afternoon, several months after the incident, the courthouse hosted a public seminar on ethics and public service for college students considering careers in law enforcement and the legal profession. Vanessa was invited to speak about integrity. Ryan attended with several officers from his department. As the audience settled into their seats, Vanessa looked across the room before beginning with a simple thought. Every uniform, every robe, every badge, and every professional title exists for one purpose, she said: to serve people fairly. The moment we allow assumptions to replace facts, we weaken the very justice we promised to protect. The room remained silent as her words settled into every corner of the auditorium. Ryan listened carefully, recognizing the same calm voice that had spoken to him outside the courthouse months earlier. Only now he understood every word completely. After the seminar ended, the students gathered around both speakers with thoughtful questions about responsibility, leadership, and public trust. Watching them together, no one would have guessed their first meeting had begun with misunderstanding. It had ended with something much stronger than embarrassment. It had ended with mutual respect. As the courthouse lights slowly reflected across the polished marble floor and the final visitors made their way toward the exit, one truth remained clearer than ever. Titles can introduce a person. Uniforms can identify a profession. Positions can describe responsibility. But character reveals who someone truly is long before anyone learns a name. The courthouse would welcome thousands of people in the years ahead, each carrying a different story, a different struggle, and a different hope. Yet the lesson left behind on those courthouse steps would continue echoing through every hallway and every courtroom. True justice does not begin with authority. It begins with the courage to see the human being standing in front of you before deciding who you believe they are.